Okay, so today I will be interviewing you about teaching and specifically um, going to be asking some questions about classroom management and experiences. So, first off, for teaching, what do you recommend people take a look at in terms of ways to understand what works best for their classroom?
Um, what do you mean? Like a
Well,
resource?
yeah,
Um, Harry Wong, The First Days of School. Um, Anita Archer, Explicit Instruction. Um, and then How to Train a Llama.
awesome. Thank
It's
you.
How to Train a Llama is one of the best resources you could have.
What do you like about it?
It's very practical, and when people present things in an analogy, it's easier to understand. And it is written by somebody who very recently was in a school setting.
Oh, that's awesome. Um, what do you think the hardest grade level might be for classroom management?
Well, there's a few. Kindergarten to start with, because the thing that we face in public education is because we're set up as, well, it's geared toward primarily white middle class, but there's different sets of expectations in classrooms compared to what students experience at home. And so getting them to understand that there are two different kind of environments that they're part of, and that the different environments could have different expectations. It's not all students are ready for that. So kindergarten is a tough time. And then anytime you add in hormones, so end of third grade, going into fourth, fifth, and then transitioning to middle school, and then again transitioning to high school, and then dealing with seniors who believe they know everything.
That makes sense. Um, for your student teaching, was classroom management an important part of that, or did it seem like something you had to figure out by yourself?
I had a really good master teacher that he was very traditional in his approaches to classroom management. He did not assume that kids knew what was expected of them. So he treated it like its own lesson, like you're teaching regrouping in math. Not all students know how to do that. So you have to teach it step by step. And same thing with behavior. Not all students know how to behave. So you have to teach it step by step. And so he was a really good example of that. And that's something that when I have the opportunity to interview teachers and student teachers, and I ask them about classroom management, what I'm looking for is them to say that they're going to approach it as they would a reading or a math lesson.
That makes sense. And in terms of ranking skills that make a qualified teacher, would you
I'm sorry,
place
you were breaking.
when you're
What's that?
ranking skills for a qualified teacher,
Mhm.
where would classroom management fall?
Pretty high, but if you're asking me about my interviewing and the way I select teachers, I'm very, uh, well, I tend to hire people that have a personality for teaching and a desire for teaching. because there are a lot of things that you can learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you could read this book or that book, but if you don't have the personality for teaching, I can't give you a book on how to be a person who is going to be welcoming to students. So I tend to try to get a lot from the interview on what kind of person is this? Will they interact with students and other staff members? Do they have a passion for teaching? And really, do they have the kind of the energy level that's required of teaching? Because if they don't realize how hard it is going to be to teach, then I don't, that's not something that I can teach them.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I feel like what you're saying is when you have someone who has passion for teaching, they end up being passionate about making sure they're correctly managing their classroom.
Yeah. And when it comes to classroom management, there is a question I always ask, and it's, what is your approach to setting up your classroom and your discipline system? And there's a lot of people who, rightfully so, talk about student voice in establishing their classroom environment. But the one thing that is, in my opinion, critical is that, yes, you want to have the buy-in from the students. You want to have that understanding that we are a community, we're responding to each other, and we have a responsibility to create an environment where we're all able to learn. But for a while, it seemed that a lot of people were saying, oh, well, it's all up to the kids. They get to decide everything, that it's a democracy. And I said, and that's a really nice feeling to be able to say that. But when it comes down to it, it's pretty much a monarchy.
Yeah.
You're in charge as the teacher, and if you can't give up that responsibility. You can involve the students and the parents in it, but when all is said and done, it's your responsibility. And so when you are establishing the expectations, I think it's very important to involve the students, but you also need to make sure that what is coming out of it is actually something that you're going to be able to live with, and that
makes sense.
It has to be in line with what your school's discipline plan is too. Because if you're in a school that is not doing restorative justice, then talking to kids about how to resolve big issues isn't going to be taken as well in the school that does have restorative justice practices.
That makes sense. Well, thank you for interviewing. I know that you have a lot of experience being an elementary school principal, so I appreciate your time. Is there anything else you think I should know about classroom management?
That classroom management is what, especially in the first year, is going to be, you're either going to make it or not based on classroom management, because you could have a really tough time learning the curriculum, and that's okay. It's going to be there. You can take it home for the summer. You can have a mentor for it and things like that. But when it comes to classroom management, you can't take the kids home for the summer to practice classroom management. And in most teachers who are not successful in the first couple of years of teaching, it's because they have not done the work on managing the classroom. And it's not just about managing behaviors. It's about managing time. It's about
Mhm.
managing resources. It's about managing stress. And so when people hear classroom management, they usually only think of discipline,
Mhm.
uh, but it's more than that.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.